Hello, my name is Kevin Myers. I'm the urban planner for the Chester County Planning Commission. I'd like to welcome you all to the 2021 edition of our annual Urban Centers Forum. And before we get started with our opening statements by a couple of folks, I'd like to just go through a couple of housekeeping items. One, as you probably just heard, we are recording this forum, just so you have notification of that. Each of you who are with us in person should have received a short survey that we'd appreciate if you fill that out to give us some feedback, both on this survey and how we can work with you and communicate better with our urban centers moving forward. And I'd like to hold all the questions for the presenters after all of them have finished their presentations, and I will facilitate that afterwards. For those of you that are joining us virtually, please type your questions in the question and answer section of the virtual environment. The chat is available as well, but please use that just to type in comments or to talk amongst yourselves. So I only have to monitor one thing to get those questions to our presenters. And then lastly, for those of you who are with us in person, the Oxford Borough Planning Commission does meet in this room at 6:30. So we'll kind of have to try to get out of here somewhat quickly, but as well, remember also we have our tour, walking tour of Oxford Borough afterwards. And so we hope that as many of you as like to join us with that will do so. And so with that, I will open the opening remarks here, and I'll invite Peggy Ann Russell from Oxford Borough. She's the chair of the Borough Council.
I just want to thank you for coming today. Thank you for choosing Oxford to have your meeting. Just recently, we've been in a state of having an interim borough manager, and we have a new borough manager. This is her second day, and I'll introduce her in just a moment. So this is, it was providential that you had your meeting on the second day that she is here. But we had an interim, Kerry Vargo, some of you know from Aero Consulting, and he was our interim manager for a number of months. And one of his comments was that he had no idea of all that goes on in Oxford until he came here. So we are hoping that you will see all that goes on in Oxford. And we're pretty excited about you doing the tour too afterwards. We want to thank the ACE Anti-Human Trafficking Alliance group in our community for offering a free will fair trade gift basket for you to put your name in for a drawing. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pauline Garcia Allen, who is our new borough manager, and we are absolutely thrilled. So you couldn't have come on a better day because we're all on a high.
Very brief, but just to say thank you and welcome. This is my second day as the borough manager for Oxford. I have worked with many of you around the county. As in my prior role in community and economic development, I was the borough's public funding consultant and working with other municipalities across the county. I was always super passionate about my work with Oxford. I happen to be local to the area. And so for me, it was just such a big thrill that now I get to do it full time, because as Peggy had mentioned, Oxford really is a hidden gem that not enough of the county knows about. There's a lot of history here, a lot of great things happening. And I really encourage you to stay for the walking tour, because I will be one of your tour guides, but the other one will be the super pro who knows everything about this wonderful downtown. And that is Brian Dix. And I just want him to spend a brief moment introducing himself to you, because he will be the other tour and you don't want to miss that.
Thank you.
Sorry, I hope I didn't.
Hi everyone, my name is Brian Dix. I am the newly appointed Executive Director of Oxford Main Street, not nearly as new as Pauline, but I've been with the organization for about a year. So Oxford is my hometown. I graduated from Oxford High School and then went to school in York and decided to come back. And it's been a really nice opportunity to be here and to serve this community in this role. So the role of Oxford Main Street, I'd like to joke that we get to have kind of the fun, because the borough is so functional and so good at what they do. We get to have the fun stuff. So we do First Fridays and things like that. But we also have a piece that's devoted specifically to supporting our downtown merchants as a cheerleader, if you'll use that term. So both supporting what we've got, attracting new, and also just finding ways that we can engage the community with those businesses is our main focus. We work closely with the borough, and we have a really wonderful town that I can't say enough good things about. Of course, I'm biased, but I enjoy it. And I know that if you join us for the tour, that you'll see exactly what we're talking about. Thank you for being here tonight.
so much. And now I'd like to introduce our Board of Chester County Commissioners, and we'll begin with Commissioner Watson.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. And I know you will enjoy your tour. There's a lot of great businesses in Oxford. And it's nice that they're able to show you what they have available. You know, our urban centers are the key focus for the county, and their success is critical to our overall well-being. Within Landscapes 3, the county's comprehensive plan, our 15 boroughs in the city of Coatesville are designated as urban centers and natural places for new development and growth. In fact, continued revitalization of our urban centers is a core principle of Landscapes 3 and critical for the county's efforts of balancing growth and preservation. This revitalization is also critical for our economy and helps meet the prosper goal of Landscapes 3. I'll turn it over to Commissioner Maxwell. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. It's good to see some of my friends in Oxford. I'm sorry I'm not there. I was going to drive there, and then I got pulled back to the office, and I'm sorry for that. But good to see Peggy Ann and Bob and everyone down there in Oxford. I wish I could be there with you right now. Certainly could use a good tour. Really excited for what this Urban Centers Forum provides as an opportunity to address current topics facing urban centers, and for attendees to network with each other to learn about how they are tackling the issues that everyone is facing around us. All of our goals, all 6 of our goals in our Landscapes 3 incorporate green infrastructure into their recommendations, such as the open space preservation program, natural resource protection, park development, street tree planting, so important in Oxford, Main Street streetscaping, trail development, and of course, as we've learned a month and a half ago, and I've learned for some time, best management when it comes to stormwater improvements. We're seeing increasing average temperatures and increasing frequency and intensity of storms and rainfall impacting our boroughs and municipalities, but particularly our urban centers, as evidenced by the effects of Ida in early September in Coatesville, downtown Modena, and so many other places like Avondale. The need for green infrastructure to address issues such as stormwater and urban heat islands is self-evident, and these improvements also offer so many ancillary benefits such as shade, improved aesthetics, reduced cooling costs, better public health, something we care deeply about, increased property values, and reduced stormwater runoff. Green infrastructure should be considered as important as other traditional infrastructures, such as roads, water, sewer, and stormwater facilities. While green infrastructure may be separate or independent, such as a park, it can and should be also incorporated into other infrastructure. Incorporation within transportation improvements is one possibility. The roundabout presentation we will hear about at today's forum also provides an example. With that, wish I could be with you, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Michelle Kline.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's so great. I think this is, I believe this is our first forum where we actually have the tour and in-place option back again. So I always say every day, any little positive step forward is very exciting for all of us in the county. And this topic is particularly relevant, as my colleague said. Green infrastructure can include all or a portion of larger features such as municipal parks, greenways, or stream corridors, but may also include street trees, impervious paving, rain gardens, or urban forests on public or private property, green bump outs, green roofs, cool roofs, or subsurface irrigation for new development in urban areas. New ideas and technologies are constantly evolving. Green infrastructure such as street trees or green bump outs have numerous benefits, including, but not limited to, reducing temperature, reduction of stormwater, carbon sequestration, which is air quality, wildlife habitat, and even quantified economic value, such as increased property value and sales volume due to both attractiveness and shade on a hot day for pedestrian comfort. The county offers programs and funding for planning green infrastructure through the Planning Commission's Vision Partnership Program, and funding for installation through the Department of Community Development's Community Revitalization Program. In fact, the county has invested $71 million in our urban centers through the revitalization program. We encourage our urban centers and all municipalities to take steps to implement green infrastructure, to build resiliency, reduce the effect of storm events, decrease costs, and make the community more appealing for investment. These efforts should certainly be taken on individually by municipalities, but also in partnership with other municipalities, the county, the state, and agencies such as PennDOT, DCED, and DCNR. By working together, we can continue to see our urban centers provide a high quality of life for their residents and successfully revitalize. So enjoy the talk and enjoy the walk.
Thank you, Commissioners, appreciate your comments. And now I'll turn it over to our department heads, and starting with Brianna, the Executive Director of the Chester County Planning Commission.
Thanks, Kevin. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to those of you virtually and those of you here in the room. So it's great that we're able to get both audiences here, those who are able to be here and see things in person, and those who are able to make it virtually. I just want to elaborate a little bit on the Vision Partnership Program. If you're not familiar with it, it's a great program that the county has that has invested a lot of money into our urban centers for planning purposes. And I think we've seen a lot of the success of this planning work. It's about, I think 12 million total. Is that the right number? I think it's 12 million total, with 6 million being from grants directly to municipalities, 2 million of value being what we have provided from our staff in kind services, because we'll go in and do plans for folks, and 4 million has come from municipalities or other partners. We have 9 of our urban centers. We have 16 urban centers. 9 of them are currently doing a Vision Partnership Program grant or planning activity. We've got 5 comp plans going on right now, 2 ordinance updates, and 2 specialized transportation studies. So I encourage the municipalities and our urban centers to take advantage of this program. It's really so important, I think, that you figure out what you want to do and then start implementing it. And we're currently working on the Oxford Comprehensive Plan and enjoying that work. Just a couple other things to quickly mention is we do have an urban design guide. Do we have some of those out front? So I encourage you to grab one of those. You can also see it on our website. We have a lot of what we call e-tools. We have Main Street e-tools and other tools on our website, a lot of data and other information that I hope everyone will take advantage of. And then finally, I would like to acknowledge Doug Fasik, the Vice Chair of the Planning Commission Board, has joined us this morning. Dr. Fasik has a local businessman here in the Oxford area. So thank you for joining us. I'll now turn it over to Dolores Colligan, who is the head of the Department of Community Development.
Thanks, Brian. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for having me here today. My name is Dolores Colligan. I'm the Acting Director of the Chester County Department of Community Development. With the focus on green infrastructure, today is a good reminder that DCD administers the Federal Community Development Block Grant Program along with the CRP program that Commissioner Kline mentioned. The CDBG funds supports community development activities to build stronger and more resilient communities. CDBG allows eligible areas, including most of Chester County's urban centers, to apply for critical infrastructure upgrades, including flood drainage, water, sidewalk, and street improvements. Some of DCD's recent CDBG activities have stabilized eroding stream banks, improved vulnerable bridges, and replaced aging infrastructure. DCD administers a 2-year entitlement application cycle for its CDBG funds. The next cycle will open spring of 2022 for funding that would be awarded in 2023 and 2024. The unit of local government receiving CDBG funds must affirmatively further fair housing. Therefore, urban centers who apply for federal funds must have zoning ordinances approved for fair housing compliance by the DCD solicitor in order to be awarded. Additionally, DCD has partnered with 5 county nonprofit organizations, including Oxford Neighborhood Services, to administer the United States Treasury Emergency Rent and Utility Assistance Program. This program is available for households earning at or below 80% of the median area income. This threshold is currently $52,950 for one-person household and $75,600 for a four-person household to be eligible. I encourage you to share this information on your in your municipal news newsletter and on your website. All requests must go through the Chester County 211 call center. I put some information on the resource table, postcards and whatnot with more information. If you could get it out to your residents who are renters who might be behind in their rent. This is the CARES Act funding and the American Rescue Plan funding that is very widely available, millions and millions of dollars available for people in jeopardy of losing their homes. So call 211, follow the prompts. An intake specialist will do a brief assessment and a referral will be made to for this area directly to Oxford Neighborhood Services to continue the application process for persons in need of this type of assistance. Then finally, please visit our website and make sure that you're subscribed to it. That's chesco.org/ccdcd. This is the means that we get information out for grant opportunities, RFP cycles, important updates, resources, and any other Chester County events that we might be hosting. So thank you for having me here today.
All right, and now it's time for our main event. And I apologize, I neglected to get full bios for our speakers, and I apologize for that. But we'll be beginning with Will Williams, who is the Sustainability Director at Westchester Borough. So Will.
Hi, everyone. Will Williams, Sustainability Director, Westchester Borough. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I'm going to talk about some of our challenges, a solution we came up to fund solutions to our stormwater challenges, as well as some of the solutions. And I said earlier, I'm going to talk about some of our successes and some of the things we've done wrong, and really just kind of bear all for everyone here. Okay, I'm sure everyone here is a little bit familiar with Westchester Borough, but here we are, 1.8 square miles of a pretty good mix of land use here. Our downtown is really pretty urban environment, comparable to any neighborhood in the South Philly. But we also have a fair amount of green space, golf course, our university, of course, which I'll talk about. It's sort of a microcosm. I live there, work there. I'm lucky enough to do both, and it's a cool place. I just pulled a couple pictures. Again, this it looks a lot like Oxford too. I didn't choose these pictures thinking about stormwater, but both of them show something interesting about stormwater. I don't know if I have a pointer here. On the left, if you look down at the bottom right of that building, there's a downspout. It's going underground directly into our storm sewer. This is sort of, how we used to handle stormwater, get it off my property as soon as possible into something in a way. This on the right, the bottom left there's a downspout coming down and it goes right onto the sidewalk. Those are problematic, especially in winter. When it's thawing, you get snow on the roof and it thaws during the day, and then it goes down the downspout and then freezes up on the sidewalk. So, these just two random pictures of Westchester, not chosen for any reason, but within them, you see stormwater issues. I mean, in these environments, it's very challenging to handle stormwater. So a couple of our challenges, and these will look familiar to anyone working in a municipal environment. Frequent flooding. I truly believe this is becoming more and more problematic, both from development point of view, more development, but also just the way the weather seems to be changing. Like a lot of infrastructure in the country, it's been underfunded over the last several decades, but not just in a public sense. I think we've neglected good stormwater management at home at our, places of business. So just within properties itself, people manage stormwater really poorly. We have 13 sections of pipe streams. That's a fancy word for, we took a stream, we built like an arch, like a tunnel for the stream to go through so we could build on top of it at some point in the last 100 years. From my point of view, it's like a good idea for like 50 years and then it gets problematic and extremely expensive to fix. About 50% of our land surface in the municipality is impervious. We have 2 impaired waterways, budget challenges, what municipality doesn't. Limited tax base. I think this is maybe somewhat unique to Westchester. We have a huge university campus. It's the county seat. Those are not taxable entities. The value of the untaxable property is about 1/3 of our total property value. So in other words, we have to raise our tax revenue from the other 2/3. That's a challenge. And of course, increasingly complex regulatory environment. In other words, we have this, the money flying away emoji. So I talked about our impaired waterways. We have 2 pollution reduction plans with DEP. One is for about 75% of the borough, which is combined, consider the Brandywine Creek, Black Horse Run, Plum Run, Taylor Run, stream sheds. Pollution reduction plan for we need to reduce the amount of sediment in those waterways. And we have some isolated flooding here. A bigger problem is our Goose Creek, which actually originates right off of 202 by like Paoli Pike and travels through West Goshen, comes down, routinely floods the main route from 202 to Chester County Hospital. I was talking about that earlier. So we have a goal of reducing sediment in Goose Creek. We also have a TMDL strategy for reducing phosphorus load in that waterway. Both of these are on 2018, 23, 2023 reporting cycles with DEP. And Goose Creek, we have widespread and severe flooding. However, it does provide recreation opportunities to the students from Westchester University. Here's we pulled these from social media after Ida. This is the diving team getting a little practice here. This guy found an infinity pool. So we obviously don't recommend that people do this, but if you do, we recommend you go feet first and always bring a flotation device. But making light of pretty serious stuff. Going back to this is a garage on the left there, and that is underwater. So something like this happens maybe every other year. Ida was really pretty spectacular. So a lot of challenges. How do we address them? In 2013, the borough created a task force to look at all these issues, project costs into the future, and find a way to fund this stuff. We looked at the existing infrastructure and the needs of maintaining that infrastructure. We looked at new infrastructure, staffing, administration, what it was going to require to, get better about stormwater management. And we ended up projecting, and this was a group of mostly engineers, but there were residents, there were politicians, but it was technical from the beginning. The projection ended up being about $1.4 million a year to, again, maintain what we have, build the infrastructure out that's in our PRP and TMDL plans, maintain the new infrastructure, hire new people, hire new consultants. Came up with 1.4 million, and from there it was pretty simple exercise. Take all the property, subtract the roads and things like that you can't really build back to, and solved for 1.4 million to come up with the base rate for a stormwater fee assessed to every property annually in the borough. Something interesting here, this is well before my time at the borough, but I thought it was interesting in kind of reviewing the history of this. The recommendation from that committee came out at the end of 2013, and then nothing happened for 3 years. And that's the politics at play. The typical fee for like your average residence, it's about 100, like a tier 2, normal house is a tier 2 or tier 3 property, that's $101 or $141 a year. That's maybe a 15 to 20% increase in, you know, if it was a tax, it would be a 15 or 20% tax increase implemented in 1 year. So I understand why it took 3 years to get that approved. And so we rolled this out in 2017. And the verbiage here is very intentional. We call it a fee, and we believe it's a fee. But depending who you ask, it's a tax. Of course, we want it to be a fee so we can assess those non-taxable entities and get them to, you know, pay into the problems that they're creating from a stormwater point of view. You know, the university doesn't just own their campus; they own buildings, office buildings, residential buildings. I mean, it's truly they're an enormous real estate owner in the borough, and it was important, particularly that the university pay into this. So here's what it's for. On the right is the language and ordinance. On the left is what that means day to day. First and foremost, managing the program. The MS4 permittings, plans, annual reporting. We just submitted our annual plan, which was prepared by a consultant. Illicit discharge detection and elimination, making sure primarily that the storm sewer isn't carrying sanitary sewer. That's the big thing. Designing projects, teeing them up to actually be implemented, and then of course repairs, maintenance, and capital improvements to the existing system. This is what a typical budget looks like. Mind you, I said we're billing 1.4. Our budget is about 1 to 1.25 million. That's because the university has challenged this in court, the fee versus tax question. And so until that is resolved, and similar cases have been settled in favor of the municipality elsewhere in Pennsylvania, but until that's resolved, we're not budgeting their revenue because they're not paying it. But this is what that money looks like year to year. About half of it goes into new capital projects for the upcoming budget year. About a quarter goes into maintenance of the existing systems. There's also bond debt up there from an original slew of projects that we did when we rolled this out. You'll see an unfortunately large legal budget there. Again, going back to the university. Professional fees, that is the consultants, engineers that I talked about, helping us with capital project development, capital planning, reporting, updating our reports, compliance, things like that. We have personnel costs from public works, street sweeping in particular. That is a really high impact thing that we were already doing, but we get a lot of credit for doing it because we're taking so much stuff that would otherwise be swept into our waterways. So we were able to pay some of our public works costs there. And then admin is really a part of my time, and $11,000 for other stuff. Admin is less than 5%, and I'm exceptionally proud of that. That's very low for these types of programs. So some of the things we've done here, again, good, bad, and ugly. Here's a decent project, a curb extension, rain garden. This is a pretty good one. We get a lot of complaints from the resident of 201 there. If it gets any like more wild than this, I think at the end of the day, they lost their parking spot outside their house. So it's not really about how it looks, but they're not so happy that we decided to put infrastructure right on their curb. Here's another rain garden. Beautiful, beautiful, done with county funding. The reason this is so beautiful is because the person in this house loves the fact that we built this infrastructure on their curb. And they are out there and they plant stuff with they buy plants with their own money. They research, they buy plants, they maintain it, they clean it, they do the weeding. This is like a dream come true for us because we don't have to pay someone to do that. Across the street, however, in the same intersection, is this. This is not what it's supposed to look like. So 3 possibilities here, just totally neglected by us over the last 3 or 4 years. Maybe the person who lives there really hated it, so they ripped everything out. Or maybe this guy ripped everything out from across the street. So a lot going on here, but beneath that is 2 important things. If you build something new, there's a maintenance component going forward forever. But it also speaks to how important public involvement is. We don't want to get to a point where we have residents dictating where we're doing projects. That is not a good recipe for doing good projects. But it's really important that they have buy-in, that maybe they're not happy about it, but they're heard, that they have a suggestion that works its way into the final design. That piece of it, it's really easy from us, sitting at our desks, working with engineers. I spend all day on Google Street View looking at this stuff. Like, oh, there's a good spot for a project. You really got to, at the end of the day, you got to engage the public and get them on board with what you're doing, or at least educate them. Going back again to this one, I think it was the education thing. These things are supposed to be sort of like thriving little ecosystems and habitats and like wild little places within our municipalities. But if you don't like that aesthetically and you don't understand that wildness serves a purpose when you get 3 inches of rain in an hour, that's going to be problematic. So education and communicating and building the residents a role in the process is critically important. So those were a couple rain gardens. This was a alley that we completely redid. I want to say it's like 200 yards of permeable pavers. I'm not sure we're going to do more of this. We'll do it on small scale parking, or maybe a small parking lot or a couple parking spaces down, maybe the downhill side of a parking lot. But I mentioned maintenance issues. This is probably one of the most maintenance intensive. You can already see this is all types of weeds growing in these the cracks between. There's crowning already, and if you've worked in stormwater, it's all about gravity and topography and making water go the way you want it to go. When the road crowns, you might not necessarily be doing that as efficiently. So the left side of this alley probably doesn't drain too well into that inlet there on the right side. So again, there's a time and a place for this, but in terms of completely redoing streets with this type of solution, we probably won't do too much more of that. And then this is one of our biggest projects to date. This is one section. There are 7 or 8 banks in this stream. This is Goose Creek. I'm sorry, this is Plum Run actually. But most of this water originates on the Westchester University campus, goes downstream, just totally ripping through neighborhoods after it gets to be more spread out and more sort of suburban. So this is probably the diciest it got. The garage about to fall in the stream. So we did armoring and all sorts of stuff, new riparian buffers, things like that, to rebuild the bank, armor it towards heavy events, and really protect the property there. Unfortunately, this type of work doesn't get us any credit towards our DEP regulations. I mentioned one of the things we have to do in both of our watersheds is reduce the amount of sediment in the water according to a DEP calculation. And like the whole purpose of this is to stop erosion, which is just sediment getting into the water. But we get absolutely no credit for doing this. This is a $700,000 project over 2 years. It was really about protecting a couple properties that were literally falling in the water. But yeah, this doesn't really get us anywhere with DEP, and I think that's it's a little unfair, but it speaks to the challenges here. Couple things we're doing now. We have a county grant for this. This is Greenview Park and the Greenview Alley, infiltration trench, bioswales, new inlets, rain gardens. We're also, can't really see in this photo, but to the left, to the southwest of that parking lot is Goose Creek, which is a problem. And there's a culvert there that goes diagonal across the intersection at the very bottom of the park. And that is where the flooding, that's where all the students were swimming in those pictures. So we're also, by doing this project, we're going to move all of this drainage downstream of that pinch point and hopefully alleviate the flooding uphill. But at the end of the day, we're just moving water further downstream to the next problem. So, but this project does get us a fair amount of credit towards our sediment reduction goals and phosphorus as well. Here's another one, replacing, there's a couple outfalls here, really old CMP pipe. We're replacing with a new concrete outfall, and actually it's a big box and it filters the water. And there's like multiple levels. So the first level will filter out like trash. And then the second one leaves. And the third one, you're getting down a pretty fine like particulate matter. And that also gets a lot of credit towards our PRP and TMDL goals. Never used them before. There's pretty serious maintenance component to those, but it's a good opportunity to pilot that. So future challenges, again, I mentioned the Westchester University litigation, very unfortunate. That's about 10% of the income that we're not bringing in, and about 5% going back out the door to lawyers, which is very unfortunate. Inflation, hot topic right now, but these cost estimates are from 2013. That's 8 years ago now. So when we're going to do these projects that we had originally kind of costs analyzed almost a decade ago, we're finding some surprises. Competing priorities for funding, of course, going back to this project. Okay, we have a garage on private property that's about to collapse into a stream because of the stormwater mismanagement upstream. If we need to do this project or do something else to meet our PRP goals, we're going to do this project every time. But you know, there's only so much funding, and unless we're going to raise that, then we have to pick and choose between these priorities, and they're very significant priorities. Public expectations too. I can't tell you how many people I've spoke to that says, well, I started paying this and my basement still floods every time it rains. And it's like, that's not what this is, that's your problem. We're working on it. But you know, there's just this expectation that, well, there's a fee for this now, and my pet project or my neighborhood's problems are going to be solved. Yeah, hopefully in the long run, but we're not there yet, and it's going to take a while to get there. And also, like with a storm like Ida, it's also a very difficult conversation to have. You can't engineer your way out of that. There's nothing you can do. You can help a little bit. You can take the edge off. But those rain gardens are designed for like an inch or less rainfall. Ida, it's just, you know, there's nothing you can do. We can't engineer our way out of those storms. Maintenance, I mentioned again, every new BMP, best management practice, is going to come with future maintenance burden. So it's important to minimize those, or else your funding will go from capital heavy to maintenance heavy. And then lastly, regulatory compliance. And I sort of complain about that, but you know, we are a environmentally minded community. We want to do the right thing, but it's complex. And like I said, there are things that very much achieve the goals set by us for DEP that we don't get any credit for, and that's frustrating. So you know, keeping up with those as they change, that is a future challenge for sure. That's all for me.
All right, thank you, Will. Next, we'll have Nicole Kline. She's the Mid-Atlantic Regional Services Director at McMahon Associates. And I'll note that I had Nicole to talk about the Swathmore Roundabout, but thankfully, she's going to cover a much broader array of projects.
Thanks, Kevin. Given the topic today, Kevin asked me to speak about our Swathmore Roundabout project. And you know, with the green infrastructure focus today, I have a couple other projects that we will touch on as well. So I'm going to go ahead and start with a discussion on our Swarthmore Roundabout. So this is a picture of the borough of Swathmore before. Route 320 runs through the middle of the page there.
and really bisects Swathmore College's property that's shown here on the top of the image versus the Swarthmore Borough Central Business District that is shown on the south of this image. So our project, we were involved with Swathmore College in doing their inn and bookstore development, which we'll see in a subsequent slide. But as part of that, it was clear that some traffic infrastructure needed to be addressed. So our project area in terms of the intersection is here highlighted in yellow. The intersection of 320 with Rutgers and Fieldhouse Lane. And you can see how it really bisects those two properties, two main properties and main destinations in the borough, particularly from a pedestrian standpoint, but certainly a challenge for vehicles as well. So we'll see that a little bit more in this next slide, a couple of images. You see here some of that angled parking that we saw in the overhead. So this is really kind of sitting in the intersection. It's very wide swath of pavement. It's an uncontrolled intersection. So from a pedestrian standpoint, what was the message of this intersection? Well, it's pretty much go somewhere else. This is a 90-foot wide uncontrolled intersection, like I mentioned, and there was signage in place for no pedestrian crossings. But we know that sometimes people turn a blind eye to signs. And while there wasn't a significant pedestrian crossing issue at this location prior to the project, there was a need. People wanted to cross back and forth. And certainly the project that was proposed by the college just increased that significantly. The inn was putting a bar into a dry borough. So it became a very popular destination very quickly. So after the project, this is what Swathmore looks like today. And you can see it's really been transformed. So what we did is, as part of the inn, and you can now see that on the north side of, on the top of this image, that large new building is the inn and bookstore. We designed a single lane roundabout at this location, which addressed a lot of the pedestrian connectivity issues. You can see highlighted very clearly here in red, all the pedestrian crossing locations that were added as part of this project. And you can also see the benefits for vehicular traffic in simplifying the situation. I will note, I didn't on the existing graphic, but on the rightmost side of this image is the Septa rail line. So the Swathmore station is there. So in addition to, sort of the logical locations for pedestrian accessibility, bike accessibility, that is a major driver as well. So we really changed the narrative. These are actual screen captures from some video that we took after the project was completed. So you see, every type of user. We see people walking, we see people of different ages, biking, in this case, choosing to walk their bikes across the crosswalks of the intersection, runners crossing at the roundabout. So we really saw significant pedestrian activity back and forth between the college property and the borough central business district after the project at direct and very highly visible routes. So this also had a big transformation in terms of vehicular speeds. The posted speed limit along Route 320 is 30 miles per hour in this area. Before the project, this being an uncontrolled intersection, pretty straight shot, it has some vertical curvature, but we saw prevailing vehicular travel speeds of 40 miles per hour and up. So obviously, the roundabout had a transformative impact on speeds, but I will note just to the north or to the right of this image, we also, subsequent to the roundabout, did a project for the college installing a new long-term parking lot. And as part of that parking lot project, we installed a mid-block pedestrian crossing, which included a median, which we'll see next. But in cooperation, the two projects really work together to impact vehicular speeds. So the roundabout itself, we kept the 30 mile per hour posted speed limit along 320, but we installed features that would really, force people to drive those types of speeds. The roundabout itself has a 20 mile per hour speed. And I've noted here in the link, which you, I think will have access to the presentation after. But if you Google PennDOT roundabouts, they have a statewide roundabouts page, and our Swathmore video is highlighted on that page. And you can see for yourself, this is just a screen capture, but you can see for yourself some of the drone footage that we took. And you can see the speed compliance as drivers are navigating through that roundabout. And this shows the lighted pedestrian crossing. It has the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, as we call them. But you know, the lighted pedestrian signs, we installed a mid-block refuge median. So this is immediately north of the roundabout. You can see in the background of the image that Septa underpass, which once you pass through that and come up the hill, you come to the roundabout. So they both in cooperation had an impact on speed so that we could get a little bit more compliance with some of those travel speeds even north of the roundabout. So from a vegetation and stormwater management perspective, in general, roundabouts provide a lot of opportunities to incorporate green space in an intersection. And when you look at the Swathmore before and after, you can see that. Not only within the central median, but around the intersection itself, we were able to reduce the total impervious surface, the total pavement at this location. So typically, roundabouts of this nature do often reduce your overall impervious surface, and that was certainly the case here. With this particular project, because the intersection was a part of the larger development project, we do not have stormwater management facilities within the central island, but that's very common. And we'll see that on the next project that roundabout project I'm going to touch on very briefly. So here is another single lane roundabout. This one is actually in Luzerne County in Dallas Borough near Misericordia University, if anyone's familiar. So this is a project we actually did for PennDOT. It's Engineering District 4 up in that part of the state. This one is an example of a roundabout that we did use the central island for some stormwater management. In this case, you know, it's just a grass surface. It was kept relatively simple to keep maintenance costs down. But you can see it's a similar vantage point there on the images on the right, the top being the before. It again was a very wide intersection with the longest pedestrian crossings being 85 to 90 feet. It was a 5-leg intersection, so it's really a swath of pavement. You see on the left side of that top image, there was an abandoned gas station at the intersection. PennDOT was able to purchase that property and knock down that gas station and remediate that property. So it gave some extra space. So you see a lot more green around this intersection in that after picture. Again, not just within that central island that we might traditionally think as the opportunity for green space. So this particular project, you know, from a standpoint of the landscaping features, we were able to install a rain garden as part of this project, and we're also able to do some soil amendments, which were used to promote that infiltration. And you know, you also get the added benefit. This was a 5-leg signalized intersection before, so there was a lot of queuing and a lot of vehicle idling that was happening along the main corridor, which is Route 415. Where the roundabout after, you've got a free-flowing, low-speed travel through the intersection, and it does reduce that vehicle idling and the issues that causes for the environment. So a couple other projects I wanted to touch base on given today's topic. These ones might be familiar to some of you in the room. They are a little bit more local, certainly than the last project. So this one is the Paoli Pike shared use path. This is in East Goshen Township. It's about a 2.7 mile shared use path running east-west throughout East Goshen Township along the Paoli Pike corridor. So it was significantly funded by grants. It has been broken down into 7 different segments, and there's only one segment remaining. Looking for grant funding to be able to finish that. But here, you know, I wanted to raise this project briefly We used pervious asphalt pavement throughout the project. And when we're talking about a trail that's about 2.7 miles long, it becomes pretty significant, even though it's just a trail in terms of its width. So it really enabled us to reduce stormwater runoff and impacts from that perspective. And we were also able to install 2 rain gardens along the path that would provide those additional water quality benefits and some wildlife refuge. So we see in these images that popped up on the right here, there's a rain garden on the lower image behind that fence area. That's all rain garden. This was pretty early on, so it hadn't grown up much yet. We need to go out and get some new photos of that. And the top one, you can see a little bit closer image of the pavement surface. I do have a video here. So for those of you that know Natasha Manbeck in our office, this is her oldest daughter, Juliana, out on the trail, showing us how that pervious pavement works. And she's very excited about it. And then lastly, I wanted to touch on this project. This is a project we completed for the Land Conservancy for Southern Chester County. Again, might be familiar to some of you. This is along Chandler Mill in Kennett Township. So they were looking to do an enhancement project for the nature preserve and the Interpretive Nature Center. This installation, they were looking to do a parking area. So we did a lot of research on different pavement types for this project. Of course, they wanted to be as environmentally sensitive as possible. And so what we settled on here was a pervious concrete pavement surface. So it reduced again our impervious footprint, and it also helps to remove pollutants from the parking area. You know, you've got vehicles that are sitting there. Some may unfortunately have some leaking. You know, this surface is able to address some of the pollutant removal. And then the parking area drains into a rain garden, which enhances that water quality as well. And here's just a few images. Luckily was able to capture a few images from Google Earth from the history that you can see an overhead shot of the before. There was a very basic parking area in the before. And then on the right side, 2 after photos. The top one happened to be during a time of the year where we could actually see it because the leaves were down. But, you know, in its state during full foliage, it's kind of, you know, just, you know, blends in with that natural environment, and they're very happy with the way that project turned out. So just a couple other projects I wanted to touch on given today's topic. So appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, last but not least, we have Linn, who's the manager of the Office of Climate and Environment, and Miles Owen, who is an environmental planner. They're both from the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission.
Thanks, Kevin, for that introduction. Yeah, so good afternoon. Yeah, again, I'm Linn, and I'm here today with Miles Owen from DVRPC's Office of Climate and Environment. And we have a new title in our office. I don't know. No. I apologize for not giving you the correct. So that's a very recent update at DVRPC. So yeah, so we're happy to be here today. And Kevin asked us to talk primarily about the role of street trees and urban trees in addressing the urban heat island effect, and also helping with stormwater challenges, which we just heard a lot about from previous presenter. So, and as well, I'm going to talk a little bit about DVRPC's work in that regard. So let's see here. So I'm just going to kick off the presentation and provide a little bit of background, and then I'm going to turn it over to Miles to talk about most of the content. I'm sure most of you are familiar with who DVRPC is. We are the Metropolitan Planning Organization for 5 counties in southeastern PA and 4 counties in New Jersey. We cover 352 municipalities, 18-member board comprised of the counties, major cities, 4 state agencies, and 2 representatives from the governor's office. So we have a pretty big staff, so we do a lot of different work. We have 115 members on our staff. You know, our primary mission is the coordination of planning and funding of the region's transportation system, but we're also a comprehensive planning agency, and we focus on land use, economic development, and environmental issues. And, one of the things we try to do is, work with all of our member governments, including those 352 municipalities, which we can't get out to all of them, but, to help with promote good information and promote best practices. And, it's really great to hear from the other two presenters, great examples around stormwater management and transportation issues to help our municipalities achieve their best potential. So, two computers here. So we're going to talk about the one thing Miles is going to talk a lot about is the problems associated with the urban heat island effect. And that for a lot of you might bring to mind places like, Philadelphia, where that kind of impact is felt really strongly, but it's in all of our urban areas, including smaller urban areas of different sizes in Chester County. And, trees and street trees, which Kevin had asked us to talk about, play a big role in that. It's a timely issue. We have just finished publishing a report, what we call a municipal implementation tool brochure last May, focusing on the urban heat island effect and what steps municipalities can take to address it. We're also, let's see here, we're also wrapping up 3 community forestry management plans, which are great tools for communities to manage and optimize both their street trees and their urban forests. And Miles is leading those 3 projects. They're in the publication phase right now. Miles is going to talk in more detail about those as well. I also want to mention, we've published a lot of studies around green stormwater infrastructure, a related topic, street tree inventories, and a number of initiatives and a technical assistance project to help municipalities address their stormwater challenges. And I'll touch a little bit more on these resources at the end. The lion's share of all this information, of course, is posted on our website, including links later on in the presentation. And finally, one thing before Miles gets into it, all these challenges, are going to become more severe and exacerbated due to climate change, which is another, big piece of what we do and try to plan for at DVRPC, to project and understand what municipalities are not only facing now, but what they're going to be facing in the future with stormwater and extreme heat. So it's just going to be that much more important and also that much more of a challenge to tackle these issues. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Miles to talk about the urban heat island effect and some of our other community forestry work and how street trees and urban trees play a role in addressing these issues.
Thank you very much. There we go. All right. Yes, thank you for inviting both of us here today and the opportunity to talk to everybody. My presentation is going to be slightly more technical than I think the previous 2 presentations, just talking about, the kind of given the broad, not really the science, but kind of like the broad language and kind of a comprehensive look at all these issues in a way that is approachable, for daily work. Start with me, get this going here. All right, so you heard in the previous 2 presentations about the sustainability initiatives and green stormwater infrastructure, and how those projects are working in the field. Thank you. Those are both great presentations. So I'm going to kind of take a step back and look at kind of the urban environment and some of the issues that we see in the urban environment with heat islands, with stormwater, and then very briefly kind of go through some of the solutions. But since we've already kind of covered green stormwater infrastructure so in depth, I might move through that process a little bit faster. So starting with urban heat islands. These are all things that we've heard a lot about. We kind of all intuitively understand the concept, when you're in an urban area, when you're surrounded by concrete and asphalt on a hot summer day, it is significantly hotter than if you're out in the field, if you're on a hike, if you're in a park. So why that happens and what we can kind of do to help mitigate it is what I'm first going to talk about. So the four core causes of urban heat islands comes down to reduced vegetation, the physical properties of urban materials themselves, the geometry of how we build urban spaces and how we cluster buildings and streets together, and the heat, anthropogenic heat, which is caused by humans. So things such as air conditioners, our machines, our cars, something like that. Those are the four main causes. There are a few other ones, but that's primarily what I'm going to be talking about. Fairly self-explanatory. In urban areas, there is not as much vegetation. This reduced ground cover, it results in less shade and moisture to keep urban areas cooler. So both those are two very core components of urban heat islands, and the reduction in vegetation results in less shade and everything. Urban materials themselves. So darker surfaces reflect less heat. That means they're absorbing that heat. And also stone, concrete, brick, etc. They have the ability to absorb that heat and then slowly release it throughout the day. So when you're walking by a brick wall that has been just hit by the sun all day long, you can also feel the heat coming off of that brick wall as well as coming from the sun. So the materials themselves are significant sources of urban heat islands. And urban geometry. So this one is kind of slightly less intuitive, but as buildings are clustered closer together, that heat that's radiating off those surfaces, it doesn't get a chance to get dispersed by the wind and to go into the atmosphere. It hits other urban surfaces and gets absorbed there as well. So the heat is just bouncing off of buildings that are very closely tied together. That's one part of it. And the other part is those buildings are blocking the wind, and the wind, which would disperse this heat, is then unable to, so it creates kind of like eddies or still areas where that heat can't really be dispersed. And then anthropogenic heat, so human-caused heat from heating and cooling systems, transportation, industrial processes, etc. And so all of these causes come together to form three types of urban heat islands. And this is really important as we're talking about solutions, because each one of these has a slightly different way to mitigate it. The two primary ones are surface and canopy layer. So the surface is when you're walking across a hot asphalt parking lot, maybe you just got out of the pool and you're going to your car and you're in flip-flops or bare feet and you feel that heat coming off of the asphalt. That's going to be the surface heat island. The canopy layer is from the surface to just like the rooftop or treetop. So kind of the air that's been stuck where our faces are, where our heads are. That's kind of what we most commonly perceive of as an urban heat island, because that's like the most readily experienced urban heat island. And then the boundary layer is also, we kind of included that just to give you a scope of how urban heat islands can have an impact. So the boundary layer goes from the treetop layer, rooftop layer, up to a mile in the atmosphere. And that heat can be, can affect weather patterns, and it can affect areas that are downwind of an urban area. So, but it's less common. The first two, the surface and the canopy, are the core urban heat islands that we tend to associate with the word. And this graph, it's a graphic representation of two different snapshots in time that the EPA has put out. So you're reading this, the blue lines are nighttime, 2 o'clock in the morning, and the orange lines are daytime, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And as you kind of scale across the urban to rural to back to rural divide, their representation of the heat, it increases as you go from rural to the warehouse to downtown and back to suburban again. And at nighttime, the dotted line is the air temperature and the solid line is the surface temperature. And so what they're showing here is that the surface temperature during the day, is widely variable depending on the materials, depending on the location, depending on how that heat is being absorbed by that specific spot where you're standing. Whereas the air temperature is much more uniform across the day because the entire area is feeling those impacts. But at nighttime, you're getting that increase in the downtown area as those materials, those urban materials, that urban geometry, as it's releasing the heat. And so that's affecting both the surfaces and the air temperature. So what EPA is trying to say here with this graph, that the materials, the geometry of the urban heat, it has different daytime and nighttime impacts, and that those materials can really have a widely variable impact depending on where you are. And this is the DVRPC region, and this is just looking at surface temperatures, and we scaled it to the census block and then just took the average and kind of spread it out through an entire region. And this really shows that urban heat islands have an impact in all of the counties, and even in Chester County, you can kind of see in the, I don't know if the laser there. You can't really see on the screen, but in the bottom left-hand corner, there's Oxford as well as Westchester kind of in the middle. So Chester County is definitely less impacted by heat islands than other areas in the region, but there is still some significant impacts. And another core part of this, and I wish I had the laser so I could really point it out, but if you look at Philadelphia in the top left corner, where you have a lot more trees, and that's like the Chestnut Hill, Wissahickon Park area, there's significantly reduced heat islands. So the impacts can be extensively mitigated, you know, if you have those parks, those trees, that vegetation. And so this is what Chris kind of talked about a bit as well. And this is how it's going to start becoming more important as we progress through the years and start to really feel the impacts of climate change. The annual average temperature is increasing. We've had some significant hot years recently. The annual average temperature in the region is also dependent on two pathways, which will, as we get farther into the century, those will have somewhat divergent impacts, but either way, the area is getting hotter. But more importantly, this is those pathways broken down into how many days you'll have over a specific degree in a year. And as we're starting to see, not only is the annual average temperature increasing, but also the days where the heat index gets to a point where public health and other conditions start to become much more important as well. So in the most significant pathway at the end of the year, you will have extended periods of time that are over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And as urban materials absorb that heat during the day and release it during the night, the body needs to be able to cool down at nighttime. If you don't have that, it makes it much harder for people who are at risk of this sort of health impacts, and something to be taken into consideration. All right. So, switching gears, urban stormwater runoff. Once again, something we've heard some great presentations about today. Urban areas have much more impervious surfaces. The water is unable to filtrate into the ground, and that causes impacts throughout the entire community. Flooding, pollution, erosion, sedimentation, reduced amount of water going into the water table, in case you have people operating off of wells or stuff like that. And thermal impacts, which means the water is getting hotter that's going into the area. So it's heating up the streams and the lakes. And just as climate change will impact the heat, it will also have some impact on the precipitation, although it's kind of hard to say for certain scientifically how much that impact will be. We can say with a very high degree of confidence that there will be more rainfall and more of it will fall in more extreme events. So all at one time, kind of like we saw with Hurricane Ida a few months ago at this point. So that makes, all of these issues are going to be much more prevalent moving forward as well. So street trees and urban trees. Trees they kind of sit at the nexus of all of these issues, and they are incredible resources for a community to help mitigate and just provide for a much nicer community overall. for heat, the shading provided by trees is one of the most significant parts that they're going to have to impact heat. And you're looking at 20 to 45 degrees temperature difference just with the shade of a tree in a community. And then evapotranspiration. Apologies, it's a fairly long word, but it's the combination of the transpiration, which is when trees and vegetation absorb the water and then release it through their leaves. And then evaporation, which is when water's sitting on the leaves, it gets evaporated into the air. This reduces the temperature of the surrounding area because of the heat is a fuel source, and the evapotranspiration absorbs the heat from the surrounding area to fuel the chemical reactions of evaporation and transpiration. So fairly small impacts, just a couple degrees Fahrenheit, but somewhat significant in a largely forested area. And then trees also have significant help with stormwater. Canopy slows the rainfall down, so that's less of an erosion impact when it hits the ground. Trees capture and store some of that rainfall. The roots break up the soil to allow better infiltration, absorption of the water into the soil, slows down runoff, and can help transform and filter pollutants as well. So trees have immense and measurable impacts both on heat as well as stormwater. So I'm going to fly through this because I think this was already been very well covered. But green stormwater infrastructure is just essentially the way of putting trees and vegetation in, around, on, underneath, basically integrating all of these things into the urban environment. So you can have, just your regular streetscapes with trees and vegetation. So it's everything from, this is a full, I had a definition lined up, but I don't open my laptop again, but basically it's how do you integrate trees and vegetation into the urban environment. So everything that's been said before, rain gardens, curb extensions, trees, tree trenches, which is just all the trees connected together underground infiltration systems, stormwater planter, a gutter, which is slightly narrower stormwater planter, and permeable paving. So all of these things combined together, all the different ways of packaging trees and vegetation in the urban environment. The benefits are things that people have been talking about and things that you have seen in your day-to-day lives. It reduces the stress on your already existing stormwater infrastructure. You help protect natural resources, parks, or the Chesapeake Bay, down much farther downstream. Reduce the heat island. It looks a lot nicer. Looks better. It provides habitat for insects and animals and all sorts of different natural animals, and traffic calming. People just tend to slow down, and I feel like there's a study here, but just having the green areas and having the roundabouts with the green things and having all that, it just provides for a calmer environment. Wayfinding, people will identify that particular bump out. That bump out looks great. That bump out that doesn't, it needs to, like, those become community assets, and people can use them as wayfinding. And a sense of place, just of community, of having trees and having vegetation and being able to connect with that again. All right, so now I'm going to hand it back off to Chris.
Thanks, Miles. I think, Miles did a really good job of summarizing the centrality of trees for addressing things like urban heat island effect, urban heat island effect, and some of the stormwater challenges that are so prevalent in our urban communities. I just wanted to touch on quickly some of the resources, publications, technical assistance, some of the work that DVRPC has that you guys could perhaps access, or we could help point you to help address some of these issues. This picture here was taken from an actual project that Miles did, where you worked with this is in New Jersey, now Pennsylvania, the city of Trenton in this case, to do a community forestry management plan. And this was an engagement workshop that he helped lead. And again, this speaks to Will's point. So much of this is about engaging your residents, engaging your stakeholders to help them understand, the benefits of trees, the different roles and responsibilities that residents will have and citizens will have and the municipal government will have, so it's all clear, getting that buy-in and how this, maintaining these resources will play out. Again, let's see here. These are 3 projects that Miles is actively working on, three community forestry management plans. He didn't go into these in detail, perhaps because they're from New Jersey, but the goal here is to think holistically, about urban canopy and street trees, management responsibilities, the costs involved in all of this, and all of the ongoing efforts to do maintenance and maintain your resource. And this is a great way for communities to approach it. These plans are often prerequisites for obtaining state funding and grants, and they can also help confer additional liability protection to municipalities. In addition, DVRPC, I mentioned our municipal management of extreme heat. This is a series, we have a series of we call municipal implementation tool brochures. A number of these address issues around, again, street trees, climate change, stormwater, urban heat island effect. I have 3 of them up here. They're all available on our website. They're designed to be pretty accessible. They're 8.5 by 5.5. They're only 30 to 40 pages, so they kind of get right to the kind of information and resources that municipalities most want to use. We've also done a lot of planning projects at DVRPC, particularly some work around green stormwater infrastructure. I'm not going to get any detail here, but this was a plan we did for the city of Chester in Delaware County. We did some nice plans and renderings and identified priority sites for green stormwater infrastructure around the community. Some of that's now being implemented through the newly formed City of Chester Stormwater Authority. It's such an important, as Will was saying, it's such an important technique for urban communities. So we're always here looking for ways and opportunities to help you guys out. So feel free to reach out to us and contact us to see if there's any assistance we can provide. Our partners that we work with also provide a lot of great resources on these topics. Philadelphia has a great Green Streets Design Manual. The link is up there. And another invaluable resource that we've used is from the Penn State Urban Forestry Extension. So they have a lot of good publications and technical resources around community forests and street trees as well. All issues from planning and maintenance to cost to implementation. So these are just a few that I wanted to touch on. There are others. Also, Pennsylvania has a number of programs that provide funding for assistance with, these are focused mainly on tree acquisition and plantings. That's something, has a direct impact right on the ground, and there are resources available to help fund those programs. These are just 4 that we're more familiar with. I'm sure there are others. And this is just, a summary of, all the resources we were looking at for this presentation at a glance. And again, reach out, DVRPC. We're a broad agency. We cover a lot of topics on the technical side and on the implementation side, and we do like to help out communities in our region. So, feel free to contact us about any of these issues, and we'll try to help out in the right direction. So that's all we got.
All right, thank you so much, our presenters. I think we covered a broad array of the gambit there of everything from the science behind what's going on out there, and small projects that hopefully can be implemented across the county and all your individual municipalities. So we're moving to question and answer period, and bear with me here as we remember we're doing a virtual meeting. And I think what I'll try to do here is take a question first from our in-person audience, and then we'll try to as well see what's going on in the chat and the Q&A, and we'll get those questions rolling. So first from our audience, go ahead. And if you could state your name, what your affiliation is, and who you're addressing your question to.
I'm Robert Wilson, the citizen here in the borough and also planning commission chair in the borough. There was two questions. One goes to Mr. Williams, if I can do that first, and which is, you mentioned near the end of your presentation, which was very good, about heavy capital versus heavy maintenance. Could you point it out a little bit more? Because you have like within a municipality, sometimes there's, tracts of land, it could be a lot, something like that. How do you differentiate between the, what you'd say heavy capital versus heavy maintenance?
Yeah, well, the point that I was making was, these BMPs, these best management practices, they all have a maintenance component. It could be really small, it could be major. We're talking about putting the filtering outfall in. That is, a couple public works guys a couple times a year are spending a morning there cleaning that out, ordering new filter insert things. That is maintenance heavy. So as we do more of those projects, more money is going to be spent on maintenance than we're currently spending on capital, if you get my drift. Like every capital project creates a maintenance component. The maintenance portion of the budget changes. If the budget doesn't expand, maintenance is going to slowly eat away at the capital funding.
So would you see, doing a heavier capital portion then, would that, I think, might, benefit the municipalities to do more upfront, get enough grant money, but then with hopefully would lower the maintenance?
Yeah, it's it ultimately comes down to design and not being on the bleeding edge of certain products or processes or BMP designs. We want good things that work. But from the beginning, we need to think about maintenance and how that's going to occupy our time and attention and resources. Yeah. And I think the sad truth is, and I'll say this because I don't think there are any Westchester Borough residents here, is that fee is going to have to increase over time. Like there's no way around it. We're getting less for our money than just 5 years ago, and this is permanent, and the regulations continue to evolve, which I think they will. We're going to need more funding to comply with that.
Okay, thank you. And then just another question to Ms. Kline in regards to some of the impervious. You have concrete down for the TLC, and also along that roadway with Paoli Pike there. You're gonna, you're gonna have to vacuum. You're gonna have some means to come in and do that. And is that advised yearly then to do that? And the municipalities, they're sharing the load and as far as the various impervious structures.
Yeah, that's a really important part of that Paoli Pike Trail project. It is all contained within East Goshen Township. That in particular carries that maintenance requirement. You got to keep it vacuumed out. I don't know what the frequency is they're doing it, but I would expect it's at least annually, but I would say it's probably more frequent than that, particularly with the changing seasons and the conditions we have here in Pennsylvania. That is an ongoing maintenance item that needs to be planned for.
And how long has that been in place, that 12-foot wide path?
So it's been constructed over the past few years. The most recent segment was actually just constructed this year, but portions of it have been in place since, I want to say it may have started construction in 2017, 2018, something like that. So it's been a few years now, but it is still, we have one segment constructed earlier this year and one segment that's about 0.6 of a mile that remains to be constructed.
Okay, I guess so. East Goshen would be the ones to go to and see
Yeah.
how they're doing.
Yeah, they would, I think, absolutely be happy to share their, lessons learned throughout the process and how they're finding the maintenance. You plan for maintenance up front, but sometimes you gotta pivot, you want it to work, you need it to do what it was intended to do, and sometimes you have to adjust. So I think that would be a great resource.
Thank you.
All right, we have a question from Mark Castle from Septa, and he is asking, are there any plans to install rain gardens along some of the major streets in the borough? I have to assume, Mark, that you're talking about probably primarily Westchester Borough. I'm not sure if Oxford has any plans to that effect. And he's saying rain garden installations need to be handled in coordination with public transit where there are adjacent bus stops on the streets.
Yeah. We would love to do them, but they are very challenging to do it really comes down to space. We would love to do them because the way the DEP calculations work, they look at the land use, and it's actually fairly detailed, like at a local level. They treat land use differently, depending on what type of neighborhood it is. And, if you can funnel a large area of, I think we have like medium density urban. I think that's as dense as we get, but it's a long way of saying the more dense areas that you're doing those projects, the more credit you get to DEP regulations. So we would love to be able to do them downtown, but yeah, it comes down to space. And if you're doing something like a rain garden, you're taking away sidewalk, which people love, parking, which people love, and they pay us to use. Bike lanes is another thing. Like these vegetated curb extensions, you can't really have a bike lane there unless you're starting with a 6-lane street that's only 2 lanes of car traffic. So it really just comes down to real estate. And like I said, I would love to be able to do them. That would accelerate the rate at which we meet our goals. But it's going to be really challenging to find the locations to do them. Most of them are going to be in our lower density neighborhoods because that's why you have wide streets, low pressure on parking, good sidewalks, and it's a safe, open place to do something there.
Thank you. From the audience in person.
Yeah, I have a question for Will and Chris. And there have been studies, obviously on the street trees for 2 decades now, longer, pointing out, much of this really valuable information. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm glad that you have it on your website. I'm sure Will is very aware of all of that as well. You're talking about the DEP. I don't know where these regulations come into play with where you get the different credits, but I do know that Westchester is cutting down more of its trees than it's putting up, and rain gardens are such an important piece to this. Yeah. But obviously, street trees are, and perhaps you can quantify that, and you could say that a street tree is X, and it's comparable to X square foot, the canopy and roots, and I'm sure that you have those numbers, you come up with those numbers, and I wonder, what's that step to actually start implementing some of that in Westchester and on Westchester Planning Commission. So I'm wondering if you two can answer that in whatever ways you can. As Planning Commission, I'm aware of, as an architect, impervious and pervious regulations and how important that is to the residents of Westchester. What I can build, what I can't build, there are real dollar signs attached to that. If, for example, you could run a study and you could say, hey, my tree canopy of a street tree is worth 2 times, let's say, what pervious lawn is. I don't know what your number is going to be. Then you could start playing with trade-offs and you could say, hey, resident, you can have a little bit more pervious surface if you fund the street tree. And I know, talking to our arborists, that many of the issues we've had with our street trees is they're not properly installed with the proper under-street maintenance. So is it, so maybe you guys can riff on those.
Yeah, we are definitely losing them faster than we can plant them. I attribute that to 2 things. One is Bradford pear, if you know about trees. Dream tree, planted 1 million of them 15 years ago, and now wind blows like today, we probably lost several. It's a nightmare. Also, just urban environment. I mean, this is the Urban Centers Forum. We're all dealing with this issue.
Westchester, though, probably has a higher proportion of college kids and more Irish bars per capita. So our biggest issue with trees is, how do I say this politely? Drunk kids, I guess. It's not very polite, but it's an uphill battle. We did a couple things in 2019, a new tree ordinance. If you are trimming or cutting a large tree, even on your private property, you need to consult our arborist and get a permit to do it. If you're taking down, if you're want to trim or remove a street tree, that is actually not your decision at all. That's ours entirely. There are very, very severe financial penalties for breaking the ordinance or damaging a tree. And we had recently, within the last year, college kid jump on a tree, snap it in half, walking home from the bars, caught on camera by a business, posted it to our Facebook page, and found the individual. And it's like hundreds of dollars in fines. It's based on the diameter of the tree. But yeah, we struggle a lot with trees. So we're doing what we can to protect what we have, incentivizing it. We have a grant from Pico Green Region to plant 200 new street trees. Survival rate, though, in the downtown of Westchester is like 10%. So that means, yeah, we need to plant 10 to get one to make it 10 years. So it's really challenging, but we also have a credit in the stream protection fee. If you have one of those big trees and basically you register it with us, because we didn't really know where they all were, you get a credit toward your stream protection fee. So we're doing all of these things, financial with the law, to protect the trees, but it's really challenging. And one of my questions for you all was, how do you deal with you have any ideas for protecting the trees when they're young? Right now we're experimenting with these like cages. They look like torture devices. You have this like little tree in this big metal cage, just to buy it a few years so that if someone jumps on it, it doesn't snap. So if you have any ideas, let me know.
I would just add that one thing that you kind of brought this up, just a regular tree, even outside of a kind of like engineered GSI approach, is a form of stormwater management. So to the extent you could quantify and get credits for the kind of pollution reduction from a tree, I don't know that DEP has that. I don't think they do, but theoretically, if street trees could be counted towards, pollution reduction requirements, that could be another.
They do.
They do.
But we have to plant 20,000.
20,000. Yeah, it's pretty
It's low bang for the buck.
Yeah,
and there's just not enough space.
Right, there's not enough space. But
what about Delaware regional planning? If you came up with a number, I think that would be helpful from a local planning commission point of view.
You mean a number of in terms of
how do we value a street tree, and how do we value the urban canopy when we're talking about, among other things, stormwater management?
Yeah, I mean, that's a slightly complicated answer to that, because there's so many values. I mean, there's the impacts on stormwater and immediate erosion and runoff, and then there's the air quality benefits and the cooling benefits and the aesthetic benefits. There's lots of literature on that. We qualitatively, we're always talking about that, but I don't disagree. I think, coming up with a value in past work, I feel like I've grabbed some of those numbers when it comes to like asthma and public health and those kind of pollution reduction things. I just don't have them.
Right. No, and the number I'm specifically asking for is the stormwater. As zoning, number, as a member of the planning commission, there's only a few tools in the toolbox. And one of the key ones is pervious and impervious. And if we're trying to incentivize street trees, the little fee that's attached to, you can register a tree, as you just said in Westchester, but that dollar amount is so insignificant. Same with these lots and the $20 a month or whatever. These are pennies compared to the real issues that we're facing. And so, as a member of the planning commission, we do have a couple tools, and pervious and impervious, those are big ones. And as an architect working with clients, people are, that's the difference between, $100,000 renovation with a little addition thing, or, what you can do differently, and being able to incentivize, hey, if I plant the street tree, I can grab 5% more of pervious coverage or something like that. And I'm not putting forward that policy, but I just wondered if thinking outside the box toward being able to allow citizens to take part of in and fund these street trees. I was just talking with our street tree commissioner, who was saying funding is the key issue in Westchester, he thinks.
I mean, I think kind of like putting this a little bit, kind of responding to you. So each tree is going to absorb vastly different amounts of stormwater. So you really can't say, if I have a tree, then I get this, percent reduction, because you have a tree species which just doesn't absorb water, or ones that do. So, working at the granular scale, which, is your experience, I think is where the most opportunity for something like this would definitely, be applicable. For us, looking at a regional scale, it would be impossible for us to assess different trees, how they impact throughout the entire 9-county region. But just providing that basic level of information. I mean, if they're all, I'm sure you could look up exactly how much, each individual tree species absorbs in terms of water, and make that argument to your planning commission, like, hey, these are the 5 most common, and this is how much they absorb. Like, let's see if we can't figure out a way to do that at a much more granular level. And when you talk about how we've had a reduction in trees over the past few decades, a lot of that is due to the disease, to people damaging them. Just the urban environment is rough on trees, salt water runoff, people running over them with their cars, dogs being on them. College. I know in Philadelphia. That's new one. Yeah, I mean, because in Philadelphia, the big issue is equity. It's cost. People, even though trees are free, when people see a tree planted on the sidewalk, they're like, oh, I'm not gonna have to pay for the damage to my sidewalk. I'm gonna have to pay for new pipes for my entire house. So Philadelphia has historically had a big problem with volunteer tree crews coming through and planting trees, and then people following a day later and just taking them out again. So the education is a big component to that, but also recognizing that there are still private costs to street trees that people will have to work with. So I know Philadelphia is working on a tree plan right now for the entire city, and it's laser focused on those issues, because there are communities that are 20-30 degrees hotter during summer than other parts of the city in Philadelphia, and equity is a major factor in that. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons why there's been a decrease in trees, but unfortunately trees are a piece of infrastructure that you can install one day but not really see the full benefits until decades later. And it's not like you're installing a culvert or installing a road where you get the benefits immediately. So making that argument is one of the core pieces of every tree program, or should be.
I'll just quickly share one more anecdote about that. We had a resident got an oak tree planted in front of their house, which they wanted a tree. They didn't want an oak tree. They got an oak tree, and they escalated this to their state senator. They wanted the oak tree removed, and we're saying because of the acorns fall on their sidewalk. We're like, we got a perfectly healthy young street tree. It's going to be 10 15 years from now, it's going to be beautiful. The house is going to be in the shade. They really hate acorns, and they went to us, like, all their appeal options. Then they went to the mayor, then they went to their state rep, then they went to their state senator. And now I have a state senator's office calling me, trying to get this oak tree removed because of acorns. So, we can like laugh about some of this stuff, but people have their reasons, and they will go to great lengths to have trees removed from the front of the house, regardless of the benefits they bring.
Well, I think it's great that you guys have those protections to, penalties for residents to damage or street tree.
It's built on experience. Every problem that we've experienced to date, and trying to, let's have some checks and balances. Let's have fees, and the arborists that do the work have to be certified, and let's get good professional people in here doing work that isn't selfish or for dumb reasons. Let's make sure that it's all done and aligns with our long-term goals.
All right, thank you. This is Will again. It seems like there's a couple questions about Westchester stormwater fee. And the first question is about how is the impervious surface determined for each property? And I'm guessing that's a pretty quick answer.
Yeah, we did aerial and LiDAR imagery. What we used was actually like 2006, 2008 data. So one thing I am finding, we reassess properties when they change hands. One of the things I'm finding is a lot of properties are underassessed. So, conveniently, maybe 5, 6, 7% of the properties change hands every year. We go online. There's no like brilliant solution. We just measure on Google Earth. And the nice thing is it's not based on the exact number. They fall into tiers. So all you have to do is get it within like 200 square feet and you've got your answer. But the imagery, as the imagery improves, we find that our billing is actually going up.
Just to quickly follow up on that, really specific questions here. Roughly what % of residents fail to pay the stormwater fee?
First couple of years, it was like 35%. I'm not going to sugarcoat that either. But we are down to about 6 or 7%. Put that in perspective, that's the same number of people who don't pay their taxes, don't pay their sewer bill.
And you apply late fees or apply liens if a payment is not received?
Yep. Late fees are pretty substantial, and the property can be liened. We are just now starting to lien property owners who haven't paid their first 4 years of fees. So we also took sort of a light approach to enforcement and try to have conversations, err on the side of over communicating. But if someone is going to lien, they haven't paid 4 years, they've ignored notices from us, they've ignored certified mail they've received from a collections agency multiple occasions.
In-person questions, go ahead, sir. Hi, Bob Ketchum from the borough. And I have a tree question. So there's comment from many people about trees. But what I'm thinking about is Doug Tallamy. He's an ecologist, and he argues for the importance of planting native trees versus non-native trees. Simply because something like the Bradford pear, which is an alien, the butterflies and moths will not lay eggs on it. Their young can't live on it, is the point. So the birds don't have anything to eat. And on the other hand, you plant the natives, and oaks happen to be he says the number one. Plenty of moths and butterflies will lay their eggs on it. Birds get plenty of caterpillars to eat, so you're supporting the songbird population. It seems like 2 for 1, if we think of it. And I was just curious about how far that thinking has gotten into all of the planning.
Yeah. I will say on the street trees we're planting, there's only a few dozen that we actually permit to be planted. And again, that's informed, that list is based on our experience, what works, what doesn't work, what cause pest issues, or I might get this wrong, but we love ginkgo trees. They're beautiful, fast growers. They don't put out a lot of branches. The branches they do put out are very strong. I forget if it's the male or the female. It's probably the female. Drops this fruit this time of year. It smells horrendous. So we also we want trees to be more or less upright. We don't like low trees with super wide crowns, especially for utility issues. So we actually publish a list of trees that we permit to be planted as street trees. I think we're at the very cusp of understanding how these decisions play out in broader ecological systems. We are just at the tip of the iceberg learning about that and how important that is. And so I'm sure that list will evolve over time, but we're thinking of it, I think, more from a maintenance and disease prevention point of view than truly what is the most beneficial in terms of pollinators and things like that. But we are thinking about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, coming up with a tree planting palette, is a big part of any community that's going to do an urban forestry management plan. Talking about, and the phrase that's often used is the right tree in the right place. A lot of times that is around the maintenance issues. Do you have utilities, power lines, parking? How wide is the sidewalk? How big can the tree pit be? How far can the crown spread? But part of that is also thinking about the ecological dimensions and, native versus invasive or non-native species. So, but there's a lot of factors that have to be weighed. So it's part of the bigger conversation.
Do you know what kind of oak you planted?
I don't. No.
I mean,
One with
it
acorns.
presumably it qualifies for a city. It doesn't tear up the sidewalk. It doesn't cause other difficulties.
Yeah.
If you're okay with acorn.
Yeah. Although our list is probably newer than that particular tree was. So I don't know if we're still planting the ones with acorns. But a lot of it, I think, and now I'm out of my knowledge level, but I think a lot of it comes down to like male female. Like certainly the ginkgo thing does.
Yeah.
And when you're planting these little, what do they call them? Whips? These little baby trees, you don't necessarily know. And by the time you do, well, you've already invested 5 years in this tree. You're not gonna like chainsaw that ginkgo and then try again. 50-50. But pray you get the right one. So yeah,
Unfortunately, the ginkgo is not a native tree.
Yeah.
As much as I love ginkgo.
Yeah, they are great street trees for a lot of reasons.
One thing that, the native versus non-native, right tree, right place, and that's something a lot of municipalities deal with, kind of take their own strategy, whether they're going for aesthetics over native habitat, over stormwater management, over heat island. You really kind of have to like figure out your forest strategy, your management plan, and what your priorities are. And that's kind of where you develop your list from. Something that is also going to have a pretty major impact and will unfortunately force more non-native trees into the region is that a lot of our native species can't handle the climate that we're going to be moving into later in the century with the heat, with increased stormwater. So we're going to have to be importing tree species that can survive in the newer environments. And we're just going to have to deal with each of those issues as they come up. And hopefully species and everything adapts along with it. But at a certain point, our options will definitely dwindle in terms of what native species will be able to survive.
Okay. We'll try to go for one more question here from our audience. It's Ed Faircop, who's a planner here locally in Chester County, does a lot of work. And his question basically is around what mechanisms can we use to make sure our tree retrofits have adequate soil to survive? So I think he's talking about the base and the installation, make sure it has enough space and gets enough water, etc.
Yeah, it's another tricky question. Something we're working on. I guess the Silva cells are called, sort of the gold standard. Gives root ball a lot of room to expand, for nutrients to sort of percolate into the soil, to not immediately have your sidewalk. Eventually when you have a sycamore that's 200 years old, your sidewalk is going to, we have sidewalks that go up 3 feet to go over sycamore roots. So we're working on that, but just like everything else, it's exceptionally expensive. And so there's sort of this, I hate to say it, but there's a cost benefit analysis of, well, we think this is going to increase our survivability to maturity rate by a significant percentage, but in terms of priorities, we're losing 90% before they even get to put out decent roots. So, are we going to invest in this thing, which is actually fairly low down on the priority list? And what we really need is more cameras outside the bars.
So, yeah, we're thinking about it. We have, I think, the best arborists in the business working on our behalf, and who, they're helping us think about these things. There was a proposal to pave over the tree wells, and it was a permeable pavement. It's not as shocking as it sounds. It was a nice surface that water could percolate through. But he pointed out, like, look, the only nutrients they're getting is from this, 3 square feet of mulch every year. That's the only thing that's going down into the soil from above. And if we pave over that, yeah, it's going to look a little cleaner. We're not going to get mulch piles all over the sidewalk, but it's not good for the tree. So, a roundabout way of saying yet another thing that we're thinking about, haven't solved. Silva cells definitely have applications. We're doing them, but we're not doing them everywhere. If we think it's going to make or break the longevity of the tree, we'll do it. If it's, especially downtown, if it's more of a, grass strip between a sidewalk and a neighborhood, then we don't need to do that, but we'll be sure to break up the soil, get out any obstructions, look for utilities before we do that type of planning. So another thing we're thinking about.
No, I mean, yeah, it's just a question of engineering and the cost benefit.
Yeah, another thing though is if you can start from scratch in a brand new streetscape, there's all these things that you would do. But in these boroughs, we're looking at existing streetscapes, and also these streetscapes are centuries old. So and they're not built for today, really. The way utilities have been built out over years, who could anticipate that we need 2 lanes of parking on every 2-lane street? So, that's the other thing. If it's truly downtown on one of our busy streets that was laid out 250 years ago, you're gonna have much smaller opportunity to do things right. If it's further out from the truly developed area, and we get to redo the whole streetscape as part of a huge project, then we're gonna be more likely to do those gold standard things that we would love to do if we could elsewhere.
Great. All right, well, I think that'll conclude our question and answer session. And of course, all of the materials will be on our website and the urban centers portion of the Chester County Planning Commission website, which I think will be up here, and we get stuff out of the way. You can feel free to contact folks after the fact. Please remember for those of you who are in person, please remember to fill out your surveys that were handed out and hand to myself or some other staff. And real quickly, for our urban centers partner, I have 2 quick things. I will be conducting an independent survey for our urban centers, just to kind of enhance our communication of what the Chester County Planning Commission and myself as the urban planner can do for you. So look for that link. It's there written out, but you'll receive that and some additional communications here moving forward. We'd like to hear from you about how we can serve you better, what information we can provide, etc. And as well for our managers and council members, please know that the annual Urban Centers Improvement Inventory will be conducted coming out here soon, and that is a precursor, a prerequisite to the Department of Community Development's Community Revitalization Program. Sorry, lots of terminology there, but to get them the money to build the stuff, basically. So please look for that coming in the near future. I'd like to thank our staff. I honestly do not do this alone. Kylie and Beth and sorry, too many names, and Betty and Suzanne in the back. So I'd like to thank them, and as well for Oxford Borough for hosting us. So we have a round of applause as well for our speakers.